Welcome to Lord Johnlander, the Outlander podcast for Lord John fans, where we talk all things Outlander, but especially about Jaime and his Sassenach.
And sometimes we talk about Claire, too.
We can't promise you much, but for the next half hour-ish, we can promise chaos and to make you question whatever life choices led you to listen to us. Before we get into it, this is your one and only warning that show and book spoilers are lurking around every corner.
We're even going to spoil crap that never happened.
Hello, welcome back to Lord Johnlander. We're your hosts. I'm Mistress Pandora. My co-host Beth is giggling because we were having a great conversation
about John.
Apparently, we're just going to dive right into it because we were having this great chat about like early days of fanfic and the Outlander fandom and how it was surprisingly heavy on the John content. And then we started talking about like the origin of his character and how the Lord John series just sort of sprang up out of crap, need to write something short real fast about a side character. So we thought we'd just hit record.
And just keep talking.
So one of the
I was just
go ahead, you kick us off.
I was just saying that she has different ways that she describes like types of characters for her, and she said that John is a mushroom, and for her that's like a character that she wasn't planning on, but just kind of pops up all fully fleshed out and ready to go. And she still wasn't planning on him being a main character, but John is just relentless. Like he he gets into your heart, right? Now this is not her words, these are mine, but he just gets into your heart and your mind, and you just can't stop thinking about him.
God, that's really true. Okay, you said mushroom, and I can't help but think about John's multi-book, how do I want to word this? His archive of the taste of semen. And he
another topic that was being discussed on Twitter today.
Yeah, because he described Percy as tasting like mushrooms. Okay.
Oh yeah.
See, this is
oh boy.
I can't wait for this episode to air.
Oh god.
Oh boy. So yeah, John being the most fleshed out character was the statement I made. He's so relatable, and he's dynamic, and his flaws are charming, like the accidental kleptomania.
Oh god. I love it. I mean, it's like I don't think I picked up, like when you're first reading a book.
Yeah.
This is why you've got to reread books that you love, because when you're sometimes the first time you don't pick up on those little, and especially I think too, for me, when I'm listening instead of reading, I'll miss out on some of those little details. And it was the second time through that I was reading Brotherhood of the Blade. And I was like, oh my God, he's such a klepto.
Yes.
He's like a little, what's that bird that like collects things? Magpies. And he may even say that about himself.
Harry Quarry calls him a magpie.
That's right. But it's just, I love it because because John's the narrator, he's narrating in his head, whatever. And, so you're privy to his thoughts, and he's just like, oh yeah, sometimes, it's third person, but they're like, yeah, sometimes he just had the habit of picking up like random rings or whatever from people's houses. Like, it's totally normal. Like, it's just like, oh, this is just a thing he does. It's totally normal.
Yeah, Harry Quarry calls him a magpie. Interestingly enough, Jamie also calls Claire a magpie for how she scolds him when
Yes,
he's hurt.
that's very
Of
true.
all the birds that we could have chosen, why the same one?
That is very interesting. And you know what I just thought of too in the books? Jamie and his Sporran.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's always got like the most random shit in
But
there.
okay.
Like, there's like a little piece of sausage and like
The sausage is the funny part. The sausage is funny. He's like he's got snacks. It's his snacky bag. But like, okay, fishing line, like he's a kind of the Boy Scout sort of always prepared kind of guy.
Yeah.
And for most of his life, everything he owned or everything he needed had to fit in his sporran.
Yeah.
And yeah, the random bits of food. That's funny. Like, why are you eating
Sporran?
Are you eating Cheetos? What are you doing?
Is your Sporran full, or are you just happy to see me?
Which that is part of the purpose of a sporran, is to keep the apron down.
Yep. And I actually remember a part too. It must have been in one of the later books, because they had described Jamie's Sporran, and then I think later on Claire was in Claire's perspective, and she was talking about her pockets that she has on her for her dresses.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like she had come up with some way to have this really big pocket, and I was just like, I was like, oh my God, they've just gone full blown eccentric old people, which I love.
Might as well.
but just also just like the similarities with, like, now she's got her pocket and Jamie's got a sporran and John's just he doesn't have much of anything, just his coat pockets to store his stashes in.
You know what? I can sew a tiny bit, and one of these days I'm just going to make myself like 18th century, like the big pockets, and I'm going to cut slits in all of my skirts and dresses.
Yes.
Have these
anything
pockets.
that doesn't have a pocket will have one.
Everything needs pockets. I'm so sick of living without pockets. It's hard.
It's really wouldn't be that hard to do. I don't think.
I
think it's pretty basic sewing.
It is. Bernadette Banner has a great tutorial on YouTube.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so just drop that. She's gonna get some weird comments on her videos.
I saw this. I wish I could remember the name of the TikToker, but I forgot it. I saw this TikTok today where this woman was, she dresses up in like 18th century and stuff clothes. She might do other centuries too. But she was showing how they do like the big hair for the 18th century. Ooh. And the hairdo really reminded me of some of the hairdos from The Gathering. Especially like our author's cameo and stuff.
Yes.
But basically, so you know how they have like the bum roll, right, on their clothes, so they got to have that. But they had this big like thing that sat on their head.
Do you remember
to pile the hair up high
when Jersey Shore was so popular? Like, okay.
It was like the original Bump It.
Time is a flat circle and fashion repeats itself.
Yes. Oh God, absolutely.
I'd be okay bringing back the bum roll. It's a great silhouette. I could, and corsets, you know, it actually gives you really good like back support if it's well fitted and laced properly.
Yeah, I mean, the way that it kind of evolved to be just kind of like, oh, we've got to wear them so small to make your waist tight. Like, that was like more high society, but like just normal people just wore them for like back support and stuff.
It was a bra. Boy, I love an episode where we start on a tangent and then we just get further and further away from the point.
Should we mention what episode we're talking about?
Maybe like as an aside. So we're talking about, eventually we'll get there, episode 108, Both Sides Now. So this is our Claire and Jamie, our newlyweds episode, and poor Frank, bless his sweet little heart, is not doing well. Which is kind of where we start.
Yeah.
That's where this episode starts, is Frank at the police station. But this part wasn't in the book, right? Because the whole book, all of Outlander is told first person from Claire's point of view. So of course this stuff is in the book.
Yeah, it's not in the book, and it definitely like if you have no sympathy for show Frank, you have like even less for book Frank, because you never like get his perspective in any way, shape, or form. The only time I should say, you get his perspective once, when you get to see the letter he wrote to Brianna in like the 8th book that she finds.
More from Frank's point of view. I need Frank while Claire is in the 20th century with Brianna. Like, I just need those 20 awful years from his side, because I have a feeling it's like the way Claire remembers it and the way the fandom remembers it is very different from the way Frank would remember it.
Oh, absolutely.
And I just want to see his side of the story.
And you know, it's interesting, because I was thinking that when I was watching the show today, because I thought, when Jamie's in the police, or not Jamie, when Frank is in the police station, he's convinced that, and then later the Reverend says it, and everybody, it's like she has run away with this Highlander, and he doesn't want to believe it, but kind of like that's basically the truth he has to, I think, learn to come to live with.
Yeah.
And then I thought about like, it's crazy enough that your wife shows up again like 2.5, 3 years after she disappeared, and she's pregnant, and now she's telling you this story about how she was traveled in time and was with this Highlander. And like, I mean, Frank had to make a connection there, right? Like, he had to be like, I saw this Highlander, and now she's saying she was with a Highlander, but in like, that must have just been, I don't even know, just like shocking, devastating, strange. Like, I can't even imagine.
He thought she was lying about the time travel. I mean, of course he did. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
It is bananas.
Of course.
But he believed her enough that he kept looking. And I think that's the part where, like, that's where I start to have actually, like, truly mixed feelings about Frank, because he kept looking and ended up finding evidence to support what Claire's side of the story, but never said anything to her about it. Anyway, this may be a conversation for a completely different day. But, so I'm thinking, there was this, I had this kind of reaction watching the beginning of this episode where Frank's in the police station and he is just letting this cop have it. Like, he's just being really a complete asshole. But he's got that like scary kind of simmering under the surface, like calm anger. Like, he's mad, he's angry, he's frustrated, but he's so freaking calm about it. And so it's like, in that moment, I kind of saw some Blackjack.
Definitely. You could almost hear it in the cadence of his voice even.
Yes, there's definitely pieces of him in there, which is interesting because they're actually not directly related. But at this point, though, in the show, we don't know that Frank is not directly related to Blackjack, that it's a great uncle. I counted that wrong. It's fine. But at the same time, like,
right,
I think there's probably I'm thinking there's a storytelling reason for including this part. One, to remind us that Frank is still there. He's still living his life.
Yeah.
But also to remind us that Frank and Blackjack aren't the same person.
Yeah, that's a good point.
because it's kind of hard. Like, even in that moment in the police station, it's quite similar in how Blackjack talks to Claire at the end of the episode at Fort William.
Mm-hmm.
To an extent. It's very direct. It's that anger simmering below the surface. It's that kind of, that way of speaking that just sort of makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Like, this is the dude who can and will kill me if I say the wrong thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very measured, and it's just got this, like, something about the cadence. Like, it's just very, like, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but
yeah, it kind of, it gave me goosebumps, actually. I was like watching while I was washing dishes, and I'm like, oh, that's the wrong Randall.
But it is interesting because you really, in the books, I can't remember even if Frank, like, describes to Claire, like in Voyager, what he went through when she left.
Yeah.
I kind of vaguely think that it might have been a little, but it's really a lot of speculation, I think, on the show's part.
Yeah.
And I look, I'm not trying to say Frank just was like, no big deal, and just, like, went back to Oxford, like, better go find a new woman, but it is interesting that they showed his perspective, and it does make him a little more sympathetic. But then that whole confrontation with the two men and that woman that try to scam him, he just goes ballistic. And that's like, I think it's an interesting combination of, he's got that gene, right? Whatever that is, that rage gene.
That propensity for just unhinged violence.
Right. But also, you have to wonder how much of his experience in the war played into it as well. Like, we know he was a spy. We know he interrogated people. So, how much is this just a result of his that time and the emotional damage of that time versus, how much of it is nature, and how much of it is just grief over his wife,
I was gonna say, I would say it's 100. Okay, maybe not 100%. I would say it's 98%. He's just that upset about losing Claire.
Right.
I think he's
absolutely
he's genuinely that upset. This is, I mean, from a characterization perspective, from a human nature perspective, this is a totally, maybe not acceptable, but completely reasonable way to handle a situation like this. And it also, I like the way, I do actually like the way they handled this part of his parts of the show in this episode, because it does really tell a cohesive story for Frank. How do we get from broken up over losing his wife to going back to his life? And I like that we took the time to show that it wasn't actually easy for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And oh boy, where'd my thought go? Oh, and again, I will never be like a Frank fan, but I also think that obviously the way Frank reacted was abhorrently violent, and it's just not good. But for people that want to that compare Frank to Jamie, you can't tell me that Jamie wouldn't react in a similar or even more violent way.
Jamie would have not let that person walk
in that
away.
situation.
Yeah, no. Jamie would have absolutely killed him and not really been all that upset about it.
Yeah.
Like, let's be
Instead
honest.
of having that, because Frank has that little weapon. I don't know what those are called. It's like a little mini club. Did you notice that?
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah. So when the guys attack him, he reaches into his coat and he pulls out this little club, and it's like this tiny little handheld thing, and I've only ever heard about it in another book that I read, where some guy carried one of these things, and he starts beating them with that. So you know
that. Okay, yeah, that makes sense,
yeah,
because I was like kind of paying. I did see that he had something in his hand. I couldn't tell what it was. Because
yeah,
that scene is lit by a single candle.
yeah.
Guys, turn on a light. Like, I know it's night. There's not a moon. Is there not street lights in Inverness in the 40s? Come on.
Oh my God. Well, the
Lighting.
whole show is just so dark. And I notice it when I go to make my little, clip video things. I'm like, oh my God, can we turn up the brightening in here? Like, what the hell?
Turn on. Someone have a flashlight, a cigarette lighter, literally anything. I know it's the bane of GIF makers' existence as well. Like, your scene is lit by a single candle, and then we can't get GIFs out of it because we can't freaking see it. Yeah. So I noticed he had something in his hand based on the way he was wailing on the guy. But I didn't notice what it was. So, hey, clarification and correction for next time. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to look it up, and I'll probably have some nerdy things to say about it because I weirdly like weapons.
I found a little thing on Screen Rant about it, but it just calls it a type of baton that many officers in the Army, and then the sentence ends. So it's not a complete thought.
Okay. Well, we won't be using Screen
but
Rant.
We'll get there. Yeah. Well, yeah. It's a start.
Little Billy Keith thing. Yeah, we'll look into that. Stay tuned for next week, where we will give you more information about weapons that you don't really care about. But now you're curious.
But we do.
And
that's our podcast.
That's all that matters. Shall we skip back in time to what's their freaking names? Jamie and Claire. Good Lord. I've got John on the brain, and I'm just not thinking about the romantic leads in this damn show. Sorry.
Claimy.
Oh God, it sounds like STI. Can we come up with something better, please? Okay.
I know, it's awful.
My dear listeners, this is your homework. For next week, please send us all of the alternate ship names you can come up with that don't sound like an STI. Please. God. I can't stand it. We need to have like a ship name special and just come up with all of the horrible things. If everyone's got complex names, it doesn't work.
Yeah. But maybe sometimes complex can be good though, right? Like, because you have more to work with to incorporate them.
Anywho,
like John and Jamie, that's hard.
That is hard.
Right? Like Jomny.
See, I go with Frey, but I have my reasons.
Frey. Okay.
Fraser Gray. Anyway.
I'm like, where did that come from? Okay, got it.
I made it up. Yeah, so back to the newlyweds. The new bigamist.
Jamie is just still being like such an adorable freaking newlywed, right? Like,
so cute.
He's so cute, and he's like, they've got this whole episode. They've got this like hand holding like foreplay going on.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden now. Well, not all of a sudden, but like the tension bubble has popped.
Yeah.
And so now they're kind of enjoying it, and I'm like, oh, this arranged marriage is working out.
Yeah, and Claire is like, she's totally into it. Like,
yeah, Franco.
Yeah. Well, seriously, and because even in the beginning when he asked, like, is it like this way? Is this usual? What it is between us? And she could just be like, I mean, he doesn't know. She could just be like, yeah, it's usual. But she's like, no, like she's like, all right, I'm in.
Interesting that he specifically says, is it always so between a man and a woman?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that,
specifically.
Beth? What are your thoughts on that very specific, specifically gendered sentence?
Well, I don't think he needs to ask if it's always like this between a man and a man, because he already knows. He had Pierre.
Uh-huh. We had the exact same thought. We had the exact same thought about that exact same sentence. Like, oh yeah, specifically, he's surprised that a relationship between a man and a woman can be so similar to a relationship between two men.
And then, Claire might be thinking, herself might be thinking, no, it's not always like this between a man and a woman, but it can be like this between a woman and a woman.
Between two women. So yeah, that's it. Okay. So let's pull this thread of fun. So I mean, we've kind of touched on this before, but Claire didn't really want to go back to Frank after the war. She wanted to stay with Daria and run away with her and all that sweeping romantic stuff. And Daria convinced her not to do that. So that does kind of beg the question, like that kind of makes sense. And it almost makes me wonder if, oh, that was half a thought and it just evaporated. Hang on, let me work on it. Hang on. I'm digging deep into the bullshit box right now. Like I
love the bullshit box.
The bullshit box is my favorite box. It's also very large and overflowing. So she's kind of, she doesn't really hedge her answer, but she's like, this is different. It's not you. It's often like this, but not usually between a man and a woman. So it's kind of like they're both sort of surprised that this is working out as well as it is, and as well as their same-sex relationships could have worked out.
Yeah, and for Claire especially, because Daria wanted her to, she did go back to Frank. And she tried to give it an honest go. And I mean, she's still willing to be loyal to Frank and give it an honest go, and all of that. So I think she's really surprised that she's feeling this with another person.
Yeah.
Because she probably thought she'd only ever have that with Daria.
Right, because there's kind of this theme that goes through the series, both the show and the books, but there's kind of this theme that like you get one really good shot at love. Right. And there's also this theme that who you think it is not always who it is. Like it doesn't always work out that way. But I would argue
that's what the show tries. That's what it tries to say. Yeah. But like, I think that's bullshit, and I think that it actually proves itself wrong.
I think it does, because Claire thought that Frank was that person, and then she thought that Daria was that person, and then now she thinks that Jamie is that person, and I think that Jamie thought that Claire was that person, and then he finds out that John is also that person, and they're just having a hard time reconciling all this by the end. I feel like there was probably a point to what I just started to say, but I forgot it. So we're going to just move on.
All right.
It's a disaster.
Well, and John, too, he thought
Hector.
Hector was that person for him, too. So, yeah.
To the point that he wouldn't let Percy be that person.
Yeah. Yeah, he just was so closed off to Percy. Not completely. Like he really did. Like he went into the relationship, but he didn't go all in.
He didn't go all in.
He clearly was really still trying to protect his heart.
Yeah,
and he that's kind of a theme with him a lot, because when he talks to Claire about his cook that he has like a relationship with, and I'm not even going to say his name because I'm going to pronounce it wrong and it's probably going to be offensive to people or something, but he's he says like there's it's physical, there are feelings, but it's not like, it's just not like, it's not, he doesn't come out and say it's not love, but like, it's kind of implied, you know, and they both kind of keep themselves free to be open to other opportunities. Right. And I'd like to see, and we talked about this the other day, I think Stefan could be one of those people for John too. And the last we really hear about him is in The Scottish Prisoner. And I'd like John to explore that more
Nonsense.
because
I need more of him. He's
lovely.
He's the gigantic cinnamon roll. I love him so much. If I could pick, I'm okay. So in fic, honestly, Jamie John is typically where my heart is. But like, if I actually wanted a canon endgame for John, it would be Stefan von Nomsen, because he is so sweet. He is so kind. He's so good for John. They are so good for each other. And he is actually bisexual.
Yeah. And he cares very deeply for John. Like, you can see that, even, you know, it's such a slow burn. Like, it's a slow burn for like 3 books and whatever.
He was married, you know? To be fair. He was married at the time. But yeah, it's a slow.
But I mean, it, you know, and one, I'd like to be in his head, Stefan's head, to like, because I don't think he, probably because he was married and also because it was new to him, like, I feel like he didn't really understand his feelings for John for a long time. And that's kind of why it was a slow burn. And I would just love to get his perspective a little bit, you know?
I would love to have him back for book 10.
Yes.
I would love to have him back for book 10.
Wouldn't it be awesome if Jamie and Willie like randomly met up with him, like when they're going to rescue John, and they're like telling him the story, and he's like, John Gray?
Oh, I need this so much. Oh, I'm foaming at the mouth. I need this.
I gotta write it. One of us has to write it. We have some, I keep saying I have to write things, and then like I have so many works in progress, and I'm just like, and today I just spent my Saturday like doing nothing.
Yeah, need more of him. Boy, I'm not sure how we ended up here, but I'm not sad about it.
I always have to say, so people know, like a couple hours ago, I think it was a couple hours ago, Pan was like, I added something to the notes, and I tried to come up with a little something how we can bring John into this. And I was like, I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Okay, so I'm going to artlessly shove us somewhere else. Nope, still thinking about The Scottish Prisoner. Damn it, that book.
Which I am rereading right now. So,
okay, I zoned out for a moment. We're good. Let's see. Where should we go next? The camp?
All right.
Where are we? I'm looking at our notes, and we've been everywhere, but in order.
I know. I'm like, all right, I got to get into the notes here. Let's see. We talked about that. Like, geez. Okay, yeah. So let's go to the camp, because this is a great.
Okay,
this is a great sequence.
Yes.
I love.
Go for it.
I love Rupert telling the story. I love
the water horse.
One thing was that the water horse. Yeah. One thing I don't know why I love this like tiny little part, but like I love the tiny little insight into the men as a group when Jamie says to Claire, there's somebody here. Don't look. We all know.
Yeah.
And how the men just like kind of just give each other a couple looks, and they all are just like completely and suddenly in sync with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And they know like what's up. And I don't know why I love that so much, but every time I see it, I'm like, that's so, it makes me a little like giddy. I don't know.
It's cool. So I have a similar reaction to Jamie and Dougal fighting back to back. There is something about fighting back to back or in a triangle, in a show or a movie or a book that just, I love it so much.
I know.
Whether it's subtext, and in this case it's not subtext, it's just they're fighting and it's what it is, or if it's just like characterization, or like it's just excellent choreography on the part of the show. But I love the implicit trust that it takes between two characters that we've talked up and down one side and down the other about how Jamie should not freaking trust Dougal and how Dougal probably shouldn't trust Jamie, and they don't, except in this situation.
Yeah, except in when they have a common enemy.
Yes. The enemy of the enemy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And
yes,
like, I mean, they're still family. Like, Dougal's a colossal prick, but he's still family. And also taught Jamie how to fight.
Nobody can kill my nephew except me.
Right. And no one's going to kill my uncle but me. Like, this is more theme. But yeah, I like that. I like that fight. I think it's a fun fight. Also lit by a single candle.
Yes. I also have to say that Jamie Fraser started my obsession with men fighting with two swords at the same time. I live for it. Whenever we watch anything now where a man starts fighting with two swords, my husband just gives me this look because he already knows what I'm about to say.
Exactly what you're going to say.
Because we were watching The Last Kingdom the other day, and Uhtred took out two swords, and I was like, yes.
So I would like to point out, I watched that part of the scene, like I watched like that 25 seconds probably 8 times trying to see, because I saw that you'd put the note in to our document about the two swords. I'm like, is he fighting with two swords? Because I know how heavy a clavichmore is, and it's not light. And because it's a broadsword, that basket hilt broadsword, it was probably anywhere from 4 to 5 pounds, maybe even 6, because they're very large, very heavy. So I was trying to, I rewatched that, like I just kept rewinding, like scroll back, because I was like, did he grab a dirk? Where did he get the second freaking sword? Where did it come from?
Right.
I still can't figure out where it came from, but sure enough, it was two swords, because he'd given Claire his dirk, and also the way he was holding it, it was not, it was clearly not a sword and a dirk, which would have been his normal way of fighting.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of a nice, I didn't really notice it before. So it's kind of a nice nod to how he's an ambidextrous fighter in the books.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my second, I just love this whole sequence so much, because then out comes Ned Gowan.
Ned! Jedi dick! I love it!
He's the fucking hero of this scene. And then, he's so proud of himself after.
He's adorable. I love it. Did you see that shot? It was 20 paces if it was
20 feet for this one.
Which, yes, that's actually a really impressive shot for that kind of firearm.
Yeah. But it just shows a little bit more of like Ned's adventurous side, yes. Like his, he does not want to just be the quiet lawyer. Like he wants it on this action,
he wants to have fun.
I love it. He's amazing. But let's rewind just slightly, because before the water horse, before the while Rupert is telling the story of
Yep.
the water horse before they get attacked, the hand-holding foreplay has really intensified. They remind me so much of just like, you know, two middle schoolers who it's their first boyfriend or girlfriend. And they're just going at it with that hand holding. So I gotta say, I think we have two opportunities here for the boner scale.
Does this constitute a Jamie Fraser erection scale pause?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to know, at that moment during the hand foreplay, where are we at? Where are we at? And then I'm going to ask the same question in a different spot. So
okay.
So
what's your, how on a scale of 1 to 5 penises? Don't say 7 again. How many?
No.
How many?
I'm gonna go with like a 3 here, because they're surrounded by men, and if you've ever been surrounded by men at a campfire, they're burpy and farty, and it's just not very romantic. But at the same time, you know, this hand foreplay has really intensified, and I think Jamie just really wants everybody to go to bed, so he can have sex with his wife, which he likes to tell everybody at every opportunity that she is his wife. So I go with a 3.
3. So we're far off because I'm giving it a 1.
Oh,
and it's
interesting.
I guess it just doesn't do it for me. But unrelated to this particular erection scale, it did, because this is how I operate, it did make me think of John touching Jamie's hand in Arsmere.
Oh yeah.
And then
interesting.
And then the handshake after that totally bros being bros, like, hey man, want to bang if you'll take care of my son thing. That's normal.
Yes.
Yeah, that also kind of popped into my mind as well, because there was some caressing involved there.
Well, it was interesting because I had never really, so I really like making these like little clip videos that I've been getting into, and that was the first time I really connected those parallels, because like it's only in the previous episode, although it's years before, that John puts his hand on Jamie's and does a little caressing, and Jamie's like, I'll kill you. And then and then in the next stroke. Episode, and he like, so they reach out and they shake hands, and then Jamie reaches out and puts his other hand on top, and it's like, wow, this is like a really poignant moment. And then especially if you know everything that they went through in those 6 years, you know, between what happened in the Lord John books, it's like, even, you know, it's even more, I think, kind of special, or, you know, whatever you want to call it.
It's very significant. It's a very significant handshake. Oh, of course, we were robbed in the books. It was a kiss, but
oh God, we have to save this for season 3.
We've got to save it. That's going to be a 4-part episode. Okay, so yeah, you said 3, I said 1 on the hand caressing thing.
Okay, so now we're going to stay in our boner break and go to after the fighting. And if people don't know this, they haven't read the books, Jamie gets really worked up after he's been in a fight. So so we know that after that fight is over, that the boner is like kind of,
I will say that's a normal autonomic response. Like, that's a normal thing.
Oh, absolutely. Like,
but
yeah.
But we're going to take advantage of it for the purposes of the narration and for our podcast, because why not? So, okay. So after the fight, yeah, he's quite frisky after the fight.
Yes. So I'm going to go with a 4 though, because there's still like burpy farty men around.
So, okay, this one I actually, rounding up to the nearest half penis, is actually 4 for me.
Oh, look at that.
The fighting does it. It's the swords. Swords. I also give, so
there's gotta be some like Freudian thing going on too with me particularly enjoying watching a man that fights with 2 swords, but I don't want to pull that thread.
We probably shouldn't. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
It's true.
So I do give him, because I'm still using my rubric. I'm still using my scale. If you heard the clicking, that's what I was doing. So I give him extra points on, not extra, but like I give him a solid 5 for hotness and stamina, because he's tired, but let's not let that stop him.
No. Oh, Jamie Fraser would never. Well, never. When he gets a little older, but
I'm gonna break a hip one of these days. Okay. So this is kind of I wanted to kind of make some, there's a lot of, we've talked about parallels between Claire and her, Claire's 3 husbands.
Yes.
But there's a lot of them, and some of them are fairly superficial, but also kind of meaningful. So all 3 of them have been soldiers in some capacity. Well, Frank, less soldier, more spy, but also army training.
Yeah.
We know all 3 of them can fight. We don't see nearly enough of John fighting in the show.
Ugh. One of my favorite scenes is in Lord John and the Private Matter, when the people are all like fighting over that woman's body, and John like jumps up on to like a wagon or something, and he like pulls out his sword and is just like waving it around. Love it.
And that's not a euphemism if you haven't read the book.
Sometimes a sword is just a sword, people.
Sometimes a sword is just a sword. No, I like the cannon and Brotherhood of the Blade.
Yeah.
Taking over the cannon team. Oh.
Take charge, man. Take charge.
So yeah, we're gonna have to do a book club style thing. Anyway, I digress a lot. But so they've all had kind of similar professions and experiences, which, okay, granted, at the time was kind of the thing. But they're both really, all 3 of them anyway, are all very skilled fighters in unique ways.
Mm-hmm.
Frank is apparently really good at fighting dirty. They've also,
well, and I think Jamie can fight dirty too.
Oh, he can. He absolutely can, and he has fun with it. Like, he enjoys it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
He enjoys it.
Well, now I'm thinking about the scene in season 2 when he captures John, and he's like, he gets a little of that like sadistic, where he like
just a little
heats up the sword and like, okay, we're not, you know what, I can't do this tonight.
We're having a hard time sticking to, like, this 30 minutes is flying by. So yeah, and they're all 3 of them are very protective of Claire, which, good quality, especially when 2 of the 3 are arranged marriages for her protection. So that's a good quality. Anyway, just wanted to point that out. They're very similar. Claire has a type, whether it's necessarily her choice or not.
Oh, definitely. I mean, she's not like marrying ministers or anything.
No. Ooh, speaking of, hey, let's talk about the Rev, because there's some excellent Frank/Rev scenes, and yes, I meant that slash, in this episode, particularly after Frank beats the crap out of the scam guys in that alley. Did that scene... Okay.
Yeah.
So Reverend Wakefield brings up the Nazis.
Yes.
About how, like, they're something about drinking from an evil cup or something, and
yeah,
Frank is like, are you suggesting that I drink from the same cup, kind of thing?
Yes.
Did that scene towards the end of it, like the beginning of that scene was very it was obviously Rev being worried about Frank and like concerned that he's losing himself in his grief and his temper. Yeah. But the end of it honestly felt a little like a breakup.
Yeah, like they were just like going their separate ways. And it's almost like the Reverend has to like let him go so that Frank can let Claire go.
Yeah, it really kind of hurt my heart because I was like, oh man, still don't see any of those fics on AO3. I need more.
I'd like to too, though, kind of talk about this whole thing of drinking from the same cup. And, you know, it's interesting because the Reverend has a much more black and white view of the world, where Frank, I think, is a little more nuanced. You know, he says, you know, the Nazis drank from the same cup, and Frank, you know, is like, are you suggesting I, you know, drank from it? And the Reverend says there's only one cup. Like, there's only one cup of evil. And like, the Nazis drank a lot. You just took a sip. And it's an interesting way to look at things, but I think it's a little more nuanced. And I think Frank is thinking a little more nuanced too.
And that makes sense.
Although it reminds me of in season 3, so sorry, skipping ahead a little.
Whatever.
When Jamie and Claire have that fight in First Wife, and she is mad at Jamie for lying. I mean, she's mad at Jamie for
lots of things.
She's legitimately, you know. But, you know, one thing she says is like that he, you know, he lied to her. And Jamie says, did we not lie our way through Paris? Like, you tell lies. You just lied to Ian like 5 minutes ago about where you've been all this time. And she says, oh, it's a white lie. And Jamie says, I didn't realize lies had colors or shades or something like that. And I always thought that was a really interesting contrast and viewpoint as well. Like, and I don't mean it that Jamie is saying that you should never lie, because certainly he doesn't subscribe to that. But I think in his mind, a lie is a lie is a lie, and you shouldn't get any more moral superiority over someone when you've told a lie that you think is less of a lie.
More of that practical morality. Like he's not wrong though. I mean, like that's one of those arguments where like they're both right and they're both wrong. Yeah, but it's that practical, that kind of practicality of his moral compass and practicality of his faith.
Which, in a way, bringing it back to the Reverend, like, one, it kind of makes sense that they think in a similar way because they're both religious men. And if you think about it in that way, it really kind of is a more forgiving way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think kind of we think, you know, that thinking about lies as having like a degree of lieiness, whatever.
Lieiness. A degree of, you know, wrong, degree of evil, degree of...
Yeah, like we think like, oh, you know, it makes us feel better, but really what should maybe make us feel better is that it is bad, but everybody does it, and you shouldn't be judged for it.
I mean,
right?
Yeah, I mean, depending upon context kind of matters. And I think,
yes,
I think, so this is where I think there's some variation in Jamie's morality and Claire's morality, which is they both see nuances to the situation. Like there is a certain level of not perfectly moral that Jamie is willing to accept, and he doesn't necessarily excuse it. It's just he's willing to accept it. Right. Claire, though, is willing to what am I trying to say? Not write it off. Dismiss it? Kind of dismiss it? Like, she's willing to categorize lies based on her version of intent.
Yes.
And go with the white lies are okay, which is maybe that's more of a 20th century kind of viewpoint. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not a philosopher.
Well, and it kind of goes right along with Claire's personality of being really able to compartmentalize things.
Yeah, true.
Right? Because it just comes so natural to her to be able to do that.
And also kind of her superiority complex. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go there. Because we see it from the beginning, like from season 1, she puts herself on a different plane. Not necessarily puts herself on a pedestal, but she judges herself based on a different set of standards from other people in the 18th century because she's not from there.
Right.
But at the same time, she also kind of judges them based on her own standards. It's kind of weird. I'm not really making a whole lot of sense, I don't think, but
well, she's placing her foundation of what is moral firmly in what is moral in the 20th century. So clearly she is coming from a place of moral superiority because she has lived that morality her whole life.
Right.
And these people don't even know, the first thing about what is moral because they're not at all coming from the same place. But she tends to not ever try to put herself in their shoes.
Yeah.
And understand. And Jamie tries to help her with that some.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's almost like she comes into it with this assumption that I'm from 200 years in the future, so I'm 200 years more advanced than these people.
Yes.
That's what it is. Yep. That's what I was trying to say.
Yes, absolutely. Like, and doesn't consider that there could be things about the 18th century that are actually in some ways better than the 20th century. Yeah.
Kind of skipping around a tiny bit, but since we're on the topic of Jamie being such a practical, like pragmatic person, after the attack on the camp, he has this wonderful line: every man and woman in the world needs to know how to defend themselves.
Yeah.
Which we see in stark contrast to while Claire's getting her ski and do lessons. We see in stark contrast to Myrta and Dougal, who are like the crotchety old men going, the only good weapon for a woman is poison. And Dougal agrees. He's like, yeah, but it's not really good for combat. I do like the knife lesson.
Oh my God. That's just another fun scene. Like this episode really does have like a lot of like little fun segments nuggets until we get to the last 15, 20 minutes.
It's got fun nuggets. Angus was a really good choice. Angus was a good choice to teach her knife skills for her knife lesson. If for no other reason than they're like similarly sized.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like that you really get to see his kind of like fun, crazy side because like a lot of times you're seeing his not so fun, crazy side.
Angry and horny.
He's just he's a little like jumping bean. He's so like, he's like a little terrier, right?
Yes. I mean, it's really kind of endearing.
Yeah, it is.
To be honest.
So it's fun, and it's just in the nick of time that she gets this lesson. Because then, of course, before I move on though, I just wanted to also mention, Angus has a really good knowledge of anatomy.
I feel like he's probably filleted some people before.
I was just like, wow, this dude knows where all the major organs are.
Now
and
I got
the stuff about the ribs and the breastbone, like he really was like,
and yeah,
he could have been Claire's assistant.
He could have. Oh, if only. And where the hell did Ned pull his ski and do from? Did he pull that out? Did he pull that out of his crotch? Did that come out? Because he's not wearing a kilt. He's wearing pants. Did he pull it out of his fly? Which makes, because he says the thing about he keeps it somewhere more private, which is just that glorious little grin and twinkle in his eye. Like, God bless Ned. I love him so much. Which makes me think like he's been jumped while taking a piss before.
Yeah, probably.
Honestly, that was my only thought about like, where is he pulling that ski and do from? That is not a normal place to keep your ski and do. So yeah, it's just in the nick of time, and I don't know that we want to necessarily get too deep into this because we have oodles of opportunity to do it later. But I would just like to make my point, which is sexual violence doesn't have to be the only indication that a character is evil.
Oh my God. Yes. Preach it from the rooftops.
I will also say that John and Claire carry a dagger for the same reason now.
Yeah. Yep.
We have lots of opportunity to talk about this later, and since we did not provide a content warning at the beginning of this episode, I don't want to get too deep into it.
Yeah, I agree. So, I think the aftermath is kind of what's really important here, and the result of this is, Claire goes into shock, and then when she's not in shock anymore, she's really angry.
Yeah.
And she's taking it out on Jamie, but then she kind of realizes that she's really angry at herself because she's let herself get all caught up in Jamie and the adventure and stuff, and she forgot that her goal is supposed to be in her mind getting back to Frank. And then again, lo and behold, Craina Dune is right there.
Why did she not take a freaking horse? There were two.
I don't know.
Why didn't she take a horse? Like, yeah, it wouldn't have been stealthy, but she wasn't stealthy running up the freaking hill yelling, Frank, Frank, either. So she still would have been caught by the redcoats, but she might have had enough of a head start to get through. Dummy, take the mode of transportation.
I have to think, too, that if she hadn't just had that trauma, she might have just gone past Craina Dune and
she may not have
made her decision, or not even noticed, because, the trauma really, woke her up, made her scared.
Yeah.
And because she really, she runs towards those stones with zero regard of how this is going to freaking kill Jamie if she just disappears. The man first of all, he feels so guilty about what just happened.
Oh my God.
And we know he's so in love with her, and he is so worried about her that, he like gets, they fight about whether she should go with him to see Horrocks, and but he, even before, he's like, promise you'll be here when I get back, because he's just, their nerves are both so frayed. And so she takes off without even a concern for that. But I do have to think that a lot of that is a reaction to the trauma she just went through.
Because I'm mean. Now I'm wanting to know, is there a fic where she does actually get back to Frank at this point from Jamie's perspective?
I don't think so. Not that I know of.
Okay. I mean, I don't tend to read a whole lot of Jamie Claire fan fiction either, because there's literally millions of words in books. But now I'm curious, and I kind of want to explore it because I really like to torture people.
There could be, but not that I've seen.
Well, hey, if y'all know of one or decide to write one, let us know. Give us a tag.
Yeah.
So yeah, now Claire has been captured and she's going to Fort William, and this is just awesome sauce because our favorite crazy person is there, Blackjack, and he's kind of a kid in a candy store when she shows up.
Oh, absolutely.
Really icky.
And she has a really good plan for trying to trick him. But then she blows it.
She didn't have enough information. She didn't know that Sandringham had never been there.
Yeah. At the slightest, it's like a house of cards.
Oh yeah.
It was got knocked down at like the slightest breeze.
It was her best plan to date so far. Like it really was. That was a solid plan.
And she was doing good too.
She was doing great. Like go girl. Like it was awesome. And then she didn't have enough information and he had way more. Although the spit take when she said the Duke of Sandringham, that was pretty funny. Choke Blackjack.
And I just have to say, when this happened, when the first time I saw this, I know I always go back to that, but I like to try to kind of capture that. I was like, she and Jamie are going to be separated now, and there's going to be this whole, thing of Jamie trying to find her and blah, 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 blah. And then, holy shit.
He disappears.
McTavish. I think I screamed. Like, I think I was like,
Showing up in that window is like, that was a really fantastic entrance.
Absolutely.
That was stellar.
I love it.
That was stellar.
And then the look on Blackjack Randall's face.
Oh my God.
It's like priceless.
Is it Christmas?
You forget. I think that, I don't think they ever actually say that before that Blackjack didn't know who she was married to. So like he's you don't realize the first time that he's surprised because nobody told him.
That's a good point.
And I mean, it makes logical sense that they wouldn't have, but I think when you're watching the first time, you're not really thinking about some of those, details or whatever.
I feel like he would have demanded to see the marriage contract. Would he not?
Right?
Now I'm wondering.
That's interesting. Huh. Maybe they had a fake one drawn up too? No, I don't think so.
That wouldn't have flown. He's too smart for that.
No.
As much as it pains me to say. Randall does have a good line here that made me think of last week's episode when we were talking about the required reading, the draft version of that scene from Echo in the Bone, where Randall says to Claire, "I don't believe there is a sentimental bone in your body."
Yeah.
And that really made me think of John and Claire getting all defensive and catty at each other about John's feelings for Jamie. Not exactly a parallel. It's like a squiggly line next to a squiggly line, and they sort of kind of went in the same direction.
But, it's I mean, Blackjack is right to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a place where, like, I really identify with Claire because I don't have a lot of sentimentality, but, like, the things that I do have sentiment for are like really important. And I think Claire's like that too. And I think also Claire tries to mask anything that would make her appear sentimental because she sees that as vulnerability. And
Right.
you know, she, so I think he is right to some degree. And you can never appeal to her sentiment to help,
Yeah. That's not
you
gonna
know,
work.
convince her or get her, you know, that's never going to
You
fly.
can't really appeal to her logic either, which we've talked about before.
Well, I think you have to appeal to her moral compass,
You have to make her think
which
it was her idea.
is, yeah, you can make her think it's her idea, or you have to show her how it's going to affect the people she loves.
Yeah. Yeah, that
That's
makes
like, because
sense.
that's like, I mean, that's like her moral compass is the people that she loves, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to appeal to that and be able to show her how it affects them. Well, and in that scene, and I think even in the actual book of Echo and the Bone, I think this part remained where she doesn't want to marry John, and he's like, well, it's not just you, it's your family.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want Marcelly to be arrested, right? And
Or
that's,
Fergus, the
and
kids.
John
Yeah.
knows that, you know, and that's how he appeals to her and gets her to agree.
Yep. Like we said before, John is the difficult woman whisperer.
Yes. He needs to start teaching lessons.
He should share his secrets. Boy, is that ironic. So ironic. Did we miss any points that we would like to come back to? We're right at that 30-minute mark.
No, I think we did good. The only other thing is the fic rec.
Yep.
For this week. So we actually I just put it all out there. We actually did not remember to do a fic rec until about 10 minutes before
we started
before we started. So I had to go back. I kind of went back, and anyway, I came across this fic that I had read. I probably read it a couple years ago, so I'm a little rusty on the details, but it's called In the Eye of a Hurricane by All My Loves at Once, and it's World War II AU, and there's just a lot of elements about how war changes people in it, and especially kind of like the way war can change somebody, and not for the good. Yeah. And it kind of just connected to me with Frank and how he was probably changed by the war and allowed him to have a little more of that violence in him and stuff too. So and it was a very good read when I read it before. So we got it connecting, and it is law. That is the fic rec.
There we go. So that'll be linked on our social media posts as well, so you can go check that out. We'll leave that fic some love. Was this one of the older ones that didn't have a lot of tags? Because I was about to give my usual read the tags, heed the tags line. There's not a lot of tags.
Yeah,
there's really no tags.
There are not. And I do think in the notes, like I have it up on chapter 10 right now, and it says like reader warning, descriptions of violence. So
there you go. Old school.
So just be aware, because it was written in 2019. So
okay, well, not that long ago, but yeah, that's old school way of giving the warnings. So there you go. In the Eye of a Hurricane. Just some World War II action there. All right. I can't wait to hear the playback on this. Because it made, I feel like it was logical to us to start talking where we were, because we were already having a conversation. Like, we're just chatting away and then hit record. Boy, I hope let's go hear it.
But I hope people are just going to be like, wait, did I start? Like, did I miss something?
What a
like,
weird way to start a podcast.
We like to do things our own way around here.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll talk to you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate your time and the love that you show us on social media. It's always fun.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. This podcast is not affiliated with Outlander, Sony, Stars, and definitely 100% not with Diana Gabaldon. All opinions expressed are our own, and we may not even believe them ourselves. In fact, nothing in this podcast should be taken seriously as a general rule. We may not even be real people. Does this podcast even exist?
This podcast is not suitable for children, immature adults, homophobes, anyone who takes fandom too seriously, people who don't understand that the characters aren't real, people with sticks up their ass, people who hate fun, and people who have no sense of humor. Do not try any of these hot takes at home. We are professionals.
The FDA has not approved this podcast for human consumption. Side effects may include nausea, vomiting, the urge to send us anonymous homophobic hate, ringing in your ears, and constipation. If you experience any of these side effects, ask your doctor if dying mad about it is right for you.
If you know us in real life, no, you don't.